The haunting of Mercyfield Hospital. Mercyfield Hospital was known for its exemplary medical staff and state-of-the-art facilities, but it was also renowned for a chilling legend that had persisted for decades. The legend told of a haunted autopsy room on the hospital's 4th floor, a place where unexplained events and eerie occurrences defied scientific explanation. Dr. Sarah Harris had recently been recruited to Mercyfield Hospital as a forensic pathologist. She was known for her unwavering commitment to science and her skepticism of the supernatural. When she first heard the tales of the haunted autopsy room, she dismissed them as mere superstition. One evening, as she prepared to perform her first autopsy in the hospital's 4th floor autopsy room, she couldn't help but notice the oppressive atmosphere. The room was unusually cold, despite the warm evening outside, and the fluorescent lights buzzed ominously overhead. Dr. Harris was undeterred. She had conducted countless autopsies throughout her career and was not one to be swayed by ghost stories. She donned her surgical gown, gloves, and mask, ready to begin the procedure. As Dr. Harris began the autopsy, she noticed strange occurrences that defied scientific explanation. The instruments on the table seemed to move on their own, and the sound of whispered voices filled the room, even though she was alone. Determined to maintain her professionalism, Dr. Harris continued the procedure, attributing the strange happenings to her overactive imagination. However, as she made the initial incision, a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the overhead lights. Dr. Harris found herself in total darkness, her only source of illumination the pale glow of the autopsy table's light. She fumbled for her flashlight and managed to turn it on, but what she saw next sent shivers down her spine. On the wall, written in what appeared to be blood, were the words, "Leave this place." Undeterred by the unsettling message, Dr. Harris continued her work with the flashlight's beam. She had just finished documenting her findings when she felt a presence in the room, an icy hand on her shoulder. She turned around, expecting to find a colleague or a nurse. To her horror, she found herself face to face with a ghostly figure, a pale and emaciated woman in a tattered hospital gown. The figure's eyes were empty voids, and she let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the room. Terrified, Dr. Harris stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments. She raced for the door, but it slammed shut with an otherworldly force, trapping her inside the haunted autopsy room. The ghostly figure advanced, her hands outstretched as if to claim Dr. Harris's soul. Dr. Harris desperately searched for a way out, her heart pounding in her chest. As the ghostly figure closed in on her, Dr. Harris's fear reached a fever pitch. She knew she had to escape the room, but the door remained sealed shut, defying her every effort to open it. The room seemed to close in around her, its walls lined with shadowy figures that whispered incomprehensible words. Dr. Harris's rational mind began to unravel, and she could no longer distinguish between reality and hallucination. The ghostly figure was joined by others, their voices a cacophony of torment and despair. They reached out to her, their fingers icy cold, as if trying to pull her into the abyss. In her final moments of terror, Dr. Harris's sanity gave way, and she let out a scream that matched the ghostly chorus surrounding her. The next morning, hospital staff discovered Dr. Sarah Harris's lifeless body in the haunted autopsy room. Her death was ruled as a heart attack, but those who worked at Mercyfield Hospital knew the truth. The room on the 4th floor was cursed, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred. Dr. Harris's tragic fate served as a chilling reminder of the hospital's haunted history. Despite her skepticism, she had become a victim of the malevolent forces that lingered in the autopsy room. To this day, the legend of Mercyfield Hospital's haunted autopsy room endures, and no pathologist dares to work there alone at night. The hospital staff and patients alike are haunted by the memory of Dr. Harris's final, blood-curdling scream, a sound that echoes through the corridors when darkness falls, serving as a warning to all who enter, leave this place, or become another victim of the hospital's malevolent legacy. The malevolent maternity ward. Nurse Mia had always dreamed of working in a hospital, but her dream had turned into a nightmare when she was assigned to the maternity ward of St. Agnes Hospital. It was an old building, dating back to the early 1900s, and its history was steeped in tragedy and mystery. Mia had recently graduated from nursing school and was eager to begin her career. When she received her assignment to the maternity ward of St. Agnes Hospital, she was thrilled. It was a prestigious institution, and she had heard nothing but good things about it. On her first day, as she entered the maternity ward, Mia couldn't help but notice the peculiar atmosphere. The air felt heavy, and the dimly lit hallway gave her an uneasy feeling. She brushed it off as nerves and introduced herself to the head nurse, Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Anderson was a stern, no-nonsense woman who wasted no time in assigning Mia her first patient, Mrs. Thompson, a young woman about to give birth to her first child. As Mia began to prepare the delivery room, she noticed something odd. The walls of the maternity ward were adorned with faded photographs of women in old-fashioned nursing uniforms, their faces blank and lifeless. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes in those pictures were watching her every move. As Mia assisted with the delivery, she couldn't help but notice the strange occurrences. The baby's cries were unnaturally loud, echoing through the ward like a haunting melody. Mrs. Thompson seemed to be in more pain than the situation warranted, and Mia couldn't understand why. When the baby was finally born, Mia's heart sank. The newborn's eyes were an unnatural shade of red, and they bore a malevolent glare that sent shivers down her spine. She handed the baby to Mrs. Thompson, who seemed oblivious to her child's disturbing appearance. As the days passed, Mia began to notice a pattern. Babies born in the maternity ward of St. Agnes Hospital had an eerie tendency to cry incessantly, their cries echoing through the ward like a chorus of tormented souls. The mothers, too, exhibited strange behavior, often staring blankly at the walls as if in a trance. Mia tried to raise her concerns with Mrs. Anderson, but the head nurse brushed them off, attributing the strange occurrences to the stress of childbirth. One night, as Mia was working the night shift, she decided to investigate the mysterious photographs on the ward's walls. She couldn't shake the feeling that they held the key to the strange happenings in the maternity ward. With the aid of a small flashlight, Mia examined the photographs more closely. To her horror, she realized that the women in the pictures were all nurses who had worked in the maternity ward over the decades. Their names and years of service were listed below each photograph, and Mia noticed a chilling pattern. Many of the nurses had mysteriously disappeared or died under strange circumstances. One name, in particular, caught her eye, Nurse Margaret Johnson, who had worked in the maternity ward in the 1930s. She had vanished without a trace, and her photograph bore a striking resemblance to Mia. As Mia pondered the significance of the photographs, she heard faint whispers emanating from the walls. The voices were hushed, as if they were part of a secret ritual. She followed the sound and discovered a hidden door concealed behind one of the photographs. Mia's curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the hidden door, revealing a narrow passageway. It led her to a small room, dimly lit by flickering candles. In the center of the room was an old, weathered book. She picked up the book and began to read. It contained accounts of a dark and sinister ritual that had been performed in the maternity ward for decades. The ritual was intended to bestow unnatural gifts upon the newborns, but it came at a terrible price. The souls of the mothers who had given birth in the ward were consumed in the process. Mia's heart raced as she realized the horrifying truth. The mothers who had given birth in the maternity ward of St. Agnes Hospital were not the same women who had entered. Their souls had been taken, and they were left as empty vessels, unaware of the darkness that had befallen them. Mia knew she had to put an end to the sinister ritual. She tried to enlist the help of her fellow nurses, but they had become entranced by the malevolent forces that plagued the maternity ward. They resisted her efforts, and Mia was forced to confront the head nurse, Mrs. Anderson. To her shock, Mrs. Anderson revealed herself as the mastermind behind the ritual. She had willingly given herself over to the dark forces in exchange for power and longevity. She had also been grooming Mia to take her place as the next head nurse and guardian of the sinister tradition. Mia refused to become a part of the dark ritual. She fought back against Mrs. Anderson and the other nurses, leading to a chaotic and terrifying showdown in the maternity ward. Candles were knocked over, starting a fire that quickly spread through the room. As the flames engulfed the ward, Mia managed to escape, but the maternity ward and its malevolent secrets were consumed by the fire. The hospital was left in ruins, and Mia was the sole survivor. In the aftermath of the fire, Mia was haunted by the memories of the malevolent maternity ward. She couldn't forget the tormented cries of the newborns or the vacant stares of the mothers who had lost their souls. Years later, as she walked past the remnants of St. Agnes Hospital, she couldn't shake the feeling that the dark forces that had plagued the maternity ward were still lurking, waiting for their next victim. The legacy of the malevolent maternity ward would continue to haunt her, a chilling reminder of the horrors that could lurk in the most unexpected of places. The Cursed Ward. The old Mercy Hill Hospital was a place that most people avoided. Nestled on the outskirts of town, its dilapidated facade and eerie aura cast a shadow over the entire neighborhood. Rumors of strange occurrences and unexplained deaths had plagued the hospital for years, but none were as chilling as the tale of Ward 13. Nurse Emily had heard the stories too, but she was desperate for a job and had no choice but to accept the position at Mercy Hill. She was assigned to work the night shift on Ward 13, wing of the hospital that had long been abandoned and forgotten. As Emily made her way through the dimly lit corridors to her first shift, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The ward was like a scene from a horror movie. The walls were stained and peeling, the windows were boarded up, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Emily's footsteps echoed through the empty corridor as she made her way to the nurse's station. "Welcome to Ward 13, a gruff voice greeted her. It was the night janitor, old Sam, a man who had worked at the hospital for decades. His eyes were weary, and his voice was filled with a sense of resignation. "Thanks," Emily replied, trying to sound confident. "You'll want to be careful in this place," Sam warned. "Strange things happen here, especially at night." Emily dismissed his warning as the ramblings of an old man and went about her duties. The night was uneventful at first. She checked on the few patients who remained in Ward 13, all of them in comas or near-death states. Their shallow breaths and lifeless eyes sent a shiver down her spine, but she did her best to focus on her work. As the hours passed, Emily began to hear faint whispers echoing through the empty hallways. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the voices grew louder and more distinct. She followed the sound, which led her to a room at the end of the corridor. The room was unlike any other in the ward. It was pristine, as if it had been frozen in time. The bed was neatly made, and the machines hummed softly in the background. Emily couldn't understand how this room had remained untouched in the midst of the decay that surrounded it. As she entered the room, the whispers grew louder, and she realized they were coming from the bed. She approached it cautiously and pulled back the crisp white sheets. What she saw made her blood run cold. Lying on the bed was a patient, a man in his 40s, who appeared to be in a deep sleep. But his skin was pallid, and his lips were tinged with a sickly shade of blue. The monitors displayed a flatline, indicating that the man was dead, yet he lay there, breathing softly. Emily stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. She rushed to the nurse's station and called for help, but when the doctors arrived, they found nothing out of the ordinary. The room was empty, and the monitors showed no signs of life. The incident left Emily shaken, but she couldn't deny what she had seen. She knew something was terribly wrong with Ward 13, and she was determined to uncover the truth. She began to research the history of Mercy Hill Hospital, digging through old records and newspaper articles. What she discovered was a horrifying revelation. Ward 13 had once been a research facility where experimental treatments were conducted on terminally ill patients. The experiments had gone horribly wrong, resulting in a series of deaths and a subsequent cover-up by the hospital administration. As Emily delved deeper into her investigation, she learned that the patients who had died in Ward 13 had never truly left. Their restless spirits were said to wander the halls at night, seeking revenge on the living. The whispers she had heard were the voices of the tormented souls trapped in the cursed ward. Determined to put an end to the curse, Emily enlisted the help of old Sam, who had worked at the hospital for so long that he had become intimately familiar with its dark secrets. Together, they began to perform rituals and incantations in an attempt to free the trapped spirits. But the spirits of Ward 13 were not so easily appeased. They grew more restless and aggressive with each passing night. Shadows moved through the hallways, and eerie apparitions appeared at the foot of patients' beds. The hospital's atmosphere became increasingly oppressive, and Emily and Sam felt a growing sense of dread. One night, as they performed a particularly powerful ritual in the cursed room, the spirits manifested in a terrifying way. The room seemed to come alive, the walls closing in on them as the temperature dropped to a bone-chilling cold. The apparition of the man Emily had seen before materialized before them, his eyes filled with malevolent rage. "You should not have meddled," the spirit hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers. Emily and Sam tried to flee, but the room had become a nightmarish maze, twisting and shifting with every step. Desperate and terrified, they continued to chant the incantations, hoping to banish the spirits once and for all. With one final surge of energy, they completed the ritual, and a blinding light engulfed the room. The spirits shrieked in agony as they were banished from the cursed ward, their tormented souls finally finding peace. When the light subsided, Emily and Sam found themselves in the pristine room once more, the curse lifted. They had succeeded in freeing the spirits, but the toll on their own minds and bodies was immense. Mercy Hill Hospital was never the same after that night. Ward 13 was closed off for good, and the hospital's dark history was finally exposed. Emily and Sam left the hospital, forever haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. Years later, Emily returned to Mercy Hill Hospital, this time as a patient. Her health had deteriorated from the trauma of that fateful night, and she had never truly recovered. As she lay in her hospital bed, she could hear faint whispers echoing through the empty hallways, a reminder of the curse that still lingered in the shadows. The cursed Ward 13 had taken its toll on Emily and Sam, leaving them forever scarred by the horrors they had faced. And as long as Mercy Hill Hospital stood, the curse would continue to haunt the living, a dark and malevolent presence that could never truly be exorcised.